everyone, it's Sarah here, ready to break down the hotly anticipated sequel in the 28 Days franchise, this one titled 28 Years Later. I for one have been dying to see this film for at least a decade, and I have to say it wasn't what I expected. Also, just a heads up, due to the hefty amount of penises and other naughty bits, we are limited in showing any kind of scenes that involve the infected. Pretty much all the new alpha types run around butt-ass naked. Before we begin, please like, share and subscribe to our channel. Every new sub helps us keep motivated to creating new content with you in mind. So strap on your gear, arm yourself and let's venture into the apocalyptic hellscape of 28 years later. The film opens up on a house full of children, watching an episode of Teletubbies, which the filmmakers use an old VHS copy of it with warped sound that makes it a little bit creepier. Anyhow, some infected comes ramping through and all hell breaks loose. We watch as the parents as well as other infected children begin to rip each other apart in extremely gory fashion. Some of them even feasting on the little dead bodies. 5 minutes into the film and Boyle lets you know exactly how unrelenting this film will be. One boy manages to escape, however, his mother yelling at him to run as she succumbs to the infection herself. And he makes it to the local church, where his father, a priest, is almost gleefully awaiting his end. He gifts the cross from around his neck to his son, telling him to go, and then rants and raves about the Holy Father as a large group of rage-infected break in and begin chomping down and tearing him up. We get a bit of text on the screen that essentially undoes the ending of 28 weeks later, saying that Europe was able to eradicate the infection who made it there and then quarantined the entire of Great Britain after. We cut to some interesting style of credits and it's 28 years later where we catch some scenic shots of small island off the coast of Scotland. A long, rocky, sandy footbridge extends from the island to the mainland, which disappears when the tide comes in, effectively keeping them safe from both infected and other possible threats. The people who have been surviving here have built up quite the community, working together to make life as normal as possible. We then meet Spike and his father. Today is Spike's big day. He's going out to the mainland with his father for the first time ever. Basically a rite of passage kind of thing. They gear up, have breakfast, and just before they set out for the day, we hear a commotion from the upstairs bedroom. Here we are introduced to Isla, Spike's mother, who is incredibly unwell, causing her to have fits of emotional outbursts and forget entire moments. She clearly loves Spike though. That much shines through her delirium. I like the mother, it was sad seeing her. Once they set out for the day, the town gathers and cheers him on. They wish him luck and even mention that when he returns, they're gonna have a big celebratory shindig. These moments are intercut with footage of troops marching in the big 2 world wars, as well as soldiers in medieval times and hunters in ancient times, all marching while holding weapons and practicing killing. Rudyard Kipling's Boots begins blaring over the mixed scene, and the metaphor here is of course no matter how far society comes, there is always a cycle of violence at its core. Spike is understandably nervous, but his father looks even more worried. Not because he might lose Spike to the infected, but because Spike might not be man enough and end up embarrassing him. What a lovely father! We learn from the council who wait at the big gate to see the two of them off that once you're out there, you're on your own. You can come back anytime, but if you go missing, no one will come looking for you. The two cross the bridge and enter the mainland. It's oddly peaceful. The wind gently makes its way through the fields and the trees. Birds circle the skies, the waves of the sea roll in and slip back out along the beaches. As they head deeper towards a small town, they cut through the woods and we see our first sign of infected. These infected, however, are bloated and slow, crawling along the ground, eating whatever creepy crawlies they can pluck from the dirt. To survive the last 28 years, they've been gorging themselves on whatever carcasses they can find. But it's made them slow and somewhat stupid. This is Spike's first test, to actually get his first kill. Using a handmade bow and hand-carved arrows, he takes aim, and although nervous, fires the shot which plunges deep into the fat bastard's neck, spilling blood everywhere. Before he can come to terms with his feelings about what just happened, a second infected, a slow fat woman crawls up behind them, which the father quickly dispatches. But a third also appears, and this one's about the same age as Spike, with the same bloated, pale, cheese-like skin appearance. Spike decides not to shoot, and while his father looks at him with some disappointment, he urges Spike to follow him before even more show up. While trekking through an open field, a large herd of deer gallop across it, and I mean hundreds of them, which mesmerises young Spike. They come across an old abandoned home, which has most likely been picked through several times over, but you never know. While they don't find anything useful other than an old frisbee to play with, they do find a man strung up from the rafters, with birds pecking at his flesh and some letters carved in his exposed chest. The man isn't quite dead yet either, as he comes to life when Spike approaches him and begins howling and snarling at him. Once again, the father orders Spike to kill him, but Spike hesitates until the infected man breaks free and tries to lunge at him, to which Spike puts an arrow through his face. More footage from the village, as well as medieval archers in training and great battles of the past, are spliced in, before the film regains its footing and continues on the Spike journey. Making their way back to the beach, they spot a deer carcass in the middle of a small clearing. It's been completely torn apart. The father remarks that this wasn't done by the slow ones, but rather the runners. However, when Spike spots that the deer's head is still attached to its spine, stuck way up in a high tree, the father becomes increasingly frightened and tells Spike they need to hurry. Which they do, because it's... They begin to run back towards the footbridge when off in the distance a few runners have gathered. Naked as the day they were born, wriggling and spazzing out on the hillside. Then a tall, broad-shouldered and buff naked man appears and calmly walks to the edge to stare at them. It's an alpha, the father mumbles. He turns to his son and with a single word just tells him to run. The alpha horde, of course, begins to chase after them, and the pair occasionally turn around to lose a few arrows, taking out some that had just caught up with them, but there's just too many, too fast and not enough arrows. They duck back into an old abandoned house and climb into the attic in a very tense claustrophobic scene. The leader of the alpha pack just stands outside on the hill watching them. Since the affected have the area surrounded, they have to wait until the next morning. Hopefully they'll be gone by then and the tide would have lowered enough for them to cross back home. We get a few glimpses of Spike's inner turmoil through a series of nightmares he has. Remember, while Spike knows nothing of the world before, he's also not yet accustomed to the dangers of the rage virus, as he's lived within the safety of the island community for his entire life. So this coming-of-age trip not only introduces a cycle of violence to him by having him get his first taste of blood, but when he's killed the two infected, he's also for the first time feeling danger, that fight or flight response. And while he was so brave when they left, he is absolutely terrified now. Couple that with him worrying about his mother's condition and the deep weight on his shoulders that he feels like he's disappointing his father, and this kid has to grow up several years in just an afternoon. This film does a wonderful job exploring this, but even more so, Alfie Williams, who plays Spike, does an outstanding job giving his kid a real emotion and real nuance. You both believe he's a young child who still plays with toys and crawls into bed to snuggle with mommy, but at the same time, he's now a killer coming to grips with his own conscience after taking a life. The next morning the house begins to shake, and so the father grabs up the gear and ushers Spike out of the house before the roof collapses. Guess they have no choice now, and it's time to go back home. They sneak through the open field, no sign of the Alpha Pack, and reach the beach with quite success. However, as they begin to cross, the Alpha leader did spot them after all, and this dude starts running after them like he's a T-1000 from Terminator 2. I mean full-on spree manhood, flopping around and smacking his thighs, just barreling down the path after them. And these guys are big, a single arrow will not stop them. It's like the Juggernaut or the tank from Left 4 Dead. Spike and his father catch wind of him howling and chasing after them, and they run in full speed towards the gate, shouting at the top of their lungs to be let in. The people at the gate scramble to arm the ballista and a few fire arrows which momentarily slow the Alpha down. With the ballista fully loaded, they launch a heavy iron spike into the Alpha's chest, finally taking him down just mere steps away before he tore into Spike. That night, the town celebrates Spike as a hero, as Jamie the father tells tall tales of how Spike took down the entire group of infected, boasting how his son is the greatest hunter and killer of them all. Spike looks uncomfortable at how his father is embellishing the truth, but at the same time, the camaraderies from the townfolk and the goo-goo eyes some of the girls are making at him puts a smile on his face. At some point, the father stumbles out with a drunk younger girl, and the two have sex behind the barn, which Spike sees and feels even more betrayal. Spike returns home and goes to see his mother, who isn't doing so well. She's burning up with a fever and in and out of consciousness. One of the other survivors who stayed at the house to keep an eye on Isla mentioned that there is a doctor among them, but he went off into the mainland and no one has spoken to him for about 15 years. The following morning, Spike confronts his father and tells him to just leave them alone. He's mad that his father lied to the town and that he's been lying to his mother, and most of all, he knew about the doctor and never went to get the mom any help. Setting fire to the supply tent as a diversion, Spike takes his mother out to the mainland to go and find this doctor himself. You could effectively say that this is now the second story of the film, as the structure is almost kind of anthology-like. At one point, we randomly cut to a group of NATO soldiers who are fleeing a large horde of naked alpha zombies, and even with all their firepower, most of them are brutally killed off except for one, who manages to sneak off while his teammates are being torn apart, literally. We jump back to Spike and Isla, who are setting up for the night in this old church. While Spike insists to take watch, he does eventually end up falling asleep, just as one of those slow ones crawls into the place where they have sought shelter. When he wakes up the next morning though, he sees it with a bag wrapped around its head and smashed against the stone coffin. For a split second, we see Isla regain just a short memory of the night before, when she must have spotted it, grabbed it, and killed it to protect her son before passing out beside him. As they journey through an old town, they come across a giant angel statue made of rusted steel, which sends Isla down memory lane of when her father once stopped here alongside the road and told her a story about it. He said when you see things like that, it's like looking into the future. Because when we're long gone, it will still be there, a reminder of now. This beautiful moment is interrupted though by, dun dun dun, a horde of alpha runners, of course. They take towards the nearest building looking for anywhere to hide out. They come across a gas station which is filled with this hazy blue mist inside. Turns out there's a gas leak, but it's the only place to go into, so they dive in and try to cover their faces and not inhale the gasoline fumes. But the infected don't seem to care and come breaking in through the windows and such, swinging wildly at them, ready to end their journey right there and then. But suddenly the roof hatch opens and a man in soldier gear tells him to hit the floor before he fires a few shots, igniting the fumes, which burns out the infected monsters. Once Spike and his mother gather their wits about them and make it outside again, they are greeted by Eric, a Swedish Navy man, the only survivor of that NATO force we saw earlier. Turns out they were part of a quarantine patrol when their ship hit some rocks and sank, and while they made it onto a life raft, the current took them to England rather than the European safe zone. Since no one is allowed to leave, Eric is essentially a new member for the community, and so he tags along after hearing Spike's story about the doctor. They trek through some more of the town where Eric tells Spike about the outside world and all the things he has no knowledge about, like the internet and porn, etc. They come across a tunnel where a few buses have crashed into one another, presumably during the initial outbreak. Inside, they can hear a woman screaming. Isla instinctively goes to investigate, even though Spike and Eric try to stop her. What we see next is probably one of the most unexpected things in the film. It's an infected woman, but she's pregnant and about to give birth. At first, she growls at Isla, but when she kneels in front of her and extends her hand, the affected woman reciprocates, interlocking fingers with her, and begins to push the baby out. Isla helps deliver the child, which seems to be A-OK, as in not infected and healthy. The woman, on the other hand, passes out momentarily, but when Spike and Eric finally arrive, she wakes up in pure rage mode and lunges at Isla. Eric instinctively raises his gun and blows her away. He then points it at Isla and tells her to put the baby down. He'll take care of the monster. She refuses, and of course Spike stands between them, trying to protect his mother while also trying to talk Eric down. Eric ain't having none of it though, and begins shouting while backing up to the front of the bus, saying he will frag all three of them on the count of 5. But before he can reach one, a pair of meaty, muscular hands reaches down through the bus skylight and grabs him by the head, pulling him up and out of the scene. Spike and Isla begin to flee in the opposite direction when through the skylight drops down another alpha leader. This one even bigger than the one from earlier in the film. Again, he's super naked, so we can't show you much here. But he's easily over like 6 feet tall, 250 pounds of muscle, and in his hand he's got Eric's head still attached to his spine. The alpha leader begins chasing after them as soon as he sees the dead infected woman, and the chase eventually leads outside of the bus. Spike puts at least 4 arrows into him, but he's still coming. That is, until a small dart hits the guy in the side of his neck, stopping him dead in his track. Well, not dead, but drugged up and paralysed. Enter Ray Fiennes, aka Dr. Kelson, completely covered in iodine solution from head to toe. He used a blowgun to fire a syringe filled with morphine and other drugs, which basically counteracts the rage virus momentarily and puts him in a kind of zoned out state. Clever. He urges them to follow him back to his camp though, because eventually the drugs will wear off and they don't want to be here when he gets pissed off. So to sum up what you see next, basically the doctor has come to some kind of philosophical enlightenment, and he quotes Memento Mori, all things must die. He has spent the better part of the last decade or so collecting the bodies of the dead and building some kind of shrine or temple with their skeleton remains. He's even has a whole process of how he does it, boiling them in some kind of iron furnace, then scraping off any flesh before washing the bones and constructing his monuments. Given that the next film in the trilogy coming in January is called 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, I suspect that this won't be the last time we see this place, or maybe we even get to see how it all started. Either way, Spike has finally found his doctor, who gladly gives Isla an examination. But the news is dire. She has cancer, and it's spread throughout her brain, her breasts, part of her arm, and so forth. She's gonna die. There's nothing he can do. Spike can't accept this, and he won't accept it. But at the very heartfelt and truly tragic conversation he has, it helps him come to terms with it. And Dr. Kelson does them an even further kindness by administering a lethal dose of morphine to her, so she can slip off this mortal coil peacefully. He then does his thing and hands Spike her skull, which he places atop the massive pillar of skulls in the centre of the whole display. There's still the baby though, and so Spike sets off for home, leaving the good doctor to continue his own work. But he does not stay home. Instead, he writes a letter to his father explaining everything that's happened and that he's gonna live on the mainland for a while and not to come and find him. He leaves it in a shopping basket along with the baby just outside the gate. When Jamie the father receives the news, he absolutely loses his shit. But there's nothing he can do. And so on, we cut to Spike 28 days later, living out in the woods, travelling to the other coasts across the land. He's cooking fish when a group of runners spot him and begin to chase after him. He takes a few out while on the move and then comes to a dead end as the road has been blocked off with rubble. He turns prepared to fight when, what the hell is this? A bunch of long-haired blonde people wearing tracksuits and Christian memorabilia, as well as tons of jewellery. They do parkour flips off the rubble while wielding sticks and javelins and baseball bats and what have you. If you were struggling to picture this, it's basically the look of the disgraced Jimmy Savile. But they all have different coloured shell suits. It's kind of like the Power Rangers, different coloured, but it's fucked up. They begin to kick the shit out of the infected, taking them all down before celebrating. Yeah, I'm serious, this happens. But remember the boy from the very beginning, the one who got the cross from his father before running away? Well, this is him, all grown up, and he's leading this kind of cult. I don't know, Christian super ninjas? I really don't know how else to explain that. And then the movie cuts to the credits. What a fucking weird way to end this film. Again, this is part one of a trilogy, so I did sort of expect a cliffhanger ending or some after the credits scene that sets up the next one, but this is truly bizarre. So what do you guys think of 28 years later? Do you wish they had gone more global like they had hinted at with the end of 28 weeks later, or do you enjoy the more experimental and closed off nature of the film, which harkens back to the original? Let us know in the comments below. Personally, I both liked it a lot and wish there would have been some things cut from it, but I'm glad it wasn't just a by-the-numbers zombie-esque apocalyptic film. It had heart and a very human story at its centre. Often in zombie-type stories, the theme is that the infected aren't really the true monsters, we are, and this film carries that theme, albeit without the human antagonist. Rather, it's our own protagonist who realises this about himself and the people he loves. It also makes for very interesting commentary on the isolationism and how after the fact people always regret it and wish they were connected to the rest of the world. It's just that they're scared and don't want to lose what they have. I want to thank you all for checking out this video. Make sure to like, share and subscribe to our channel for more reviews and breakdowns every week, and I hope you enjoyed it. I have been your host Sarah, and I hope you have an amazing day and take care. And the kisses for the viewers because I love you all.